Does the idea of collaboration between Indigenous communities and local governments interest you? Today, Joe and Sally will discuss a historic agreement between Okanagan-Similkameen First Nations and local governments to address shared challenges and build a stronger future. Okay, let's get started.
Hand in hand, we build the dream, a world united, a stronger team.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive with us here at Timely Transit News.
It's great to be back.
Today we are going to be taking a close look at an incredible story that's unfolding in British Columbia.
Yeah, and it's one that I think holds lessons for all of us, really, wherever we are in the world.
Absolutely.
Right.
So to set the stage, we're talking about a historic agreement for water protection in the Okanagan and Similkameen valleys.
And this is really significant because it brings together First Nations communities and local governments in a collaborative effort to protect these vital water resources.
Yeah, this is not just like some local agreement. This is actually one of only 4 such initiatives across all of Canada.
That's right. And what's really remarkable is that this is the very first one in British Columbia.
Oh, wow.
So it's really setting a precedent, and they're actually modeling it after a successful collaboration that happened in Manitoba.
Okay, interesting. So kind of taking inspiration from what's worked elsewhere.
Exactly. And I think that's really smart because it shows a willingness to learn from others and to adapt those lessons to their own unique context.
Yeah, and I'm seeing in these articles that this agreement is being hailed as a really significant step towards reconciliation with Indigenous peoples.
Absolutely. And that's a key aspect of this whole story.
Can you tell us a bit more about why that is?
Yeah. So at its core, this agreement is really about recognizing the inherent rights and title of First Nations to their traditional territories.
Okay,
And those territories, of course, include the water resources that we're talking about.
makes sense.
And it's not just about recognizing those rights in principle, but actually putting them into practice. So this agreement aligns with both the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, or UNDRI as it's often called,
UNDI, yeah, I've heard of that.
and also with the BC Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. So that's DUII.
Okay, so we've got UNDRI, we've got DRIPA. Can you break those down for us a little bit?
Sure. So UNDRG, in a nutshell, it's an international document that outlines the rights of Indigenous peoples all over the world.
Okay.
And that includes their right to self-determination, to be free from discrimination, and to control their own lands and resources.
Gotcha.
DRIPA, on the other hand, is a law here in BC that requires government actions to be consistent with UNDIP.
Oh, okay, so it's kind of like putting those principles into practice at a provincial level.
Exactly. So this water agreement is significant because it's actually taking those high-level principles from UN DREAM and DRIPA and putting them into action on the ground.
So it's not just about protecting the environment, it's also about acknowledging and addressing historical injustices.
Precisely. And that's what makes it so powerful. It's about righting past wrongs and moving forward in a way that respects the rights and interests of everyone involved.
And I think that's what really struck me about this story is that it's not just about First Nations communities or just about local governments. It's about all of these different stakeholders coming together.
Exactly. It's about finding common ground and working together towards a shared goal. And when you think about it, that's really what reconciliation is all about.
Absolutely. And that's something that Chief Greg Gabriel of the Penticton Indian Band
Yeah.
really emphasized when he talked about the importance of moving beyond words and taking real action.
Yeah, he was very clear about that. He said this agreement can't just sit on a shelf gathering dust. It needs to be a living document that guides their actions.
I like that, a living document. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and it's not just about the current leadership either. Chief Keith Crow of the Lower Similkameen Indian Band, he was really adamant about the importance of involving the next generation in this whole process.
Oh, that's so important to get the younger folks involved right from the start.
Absolutely, because it's their future that's at stake, and they need to have a voice in shaping how these resources are managed.
And it makes me think of the 7 generations principle that many Indigenous communities follow.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful concept. Can you remind our listeners about what that is?
Sure. So the 7 generations principle basically says that when you're making decisions today, you need to think about the impact those decisions will have 7 generations into the future.
Right. It's about taking a long-term perspective and ensuring that your actions are sustainable and beneficial for generations to come.
Exactly. And I think that's really reflected in this water agreement. It's not just about meeting immediate needs. It's about ensuring the health of these watersheds for the long haul.
And that's what makes it so inspiring. It's about creating a legacy that will benefit people for generations to come.
A legacy of collaboration and respect for the environment and for each other.
Absolutely. And that's a legacy that we can all be proud of. It's like they're saying we're not going to wait for someone else to fix this. We're going to take matters into our own hands.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of courage and a lot of trust in each other.
Absolutely. And one of the really interesting things about this agreement is that it goes beyond just protecting water quantity, like how much water there is.
Okay.
It also addresses water quality.
Oh, right. So making sure that the water that is there is clean and safe to use.
Exactly. That's a huge concern, especially with things like climate change and pollution.
And it makes me think of something that Chief Clarence Louie of the Osoyoos Indian Band said about this agreement.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
He said he thinks it might be the first time that elected leadership from both Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities have come together in this way.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
Yeah. And he also made this really poignant observation that it took water, this fundamental element for life and cultural practices, to bring them together.
You know, it's almost poetic in a way, isn't it? That something as essential as water could be the catalyst for this kind of unity.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that sometimes the things that divide us can also be the things that bring us together.
Exactly. And this is something that Robert Sanford, a representative of the United Nations, actually picked up on when he commended this agreement.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Sanford actually suggested that this local agreement could serve as a global model for collaborative water management.
Isn't that amazing to think that a small region in British Columbia could inspire the world to approach water issues in a more sustainable and equitable way?
That's really exciting, but are there any potential roadblocks that you foresee?
You know, it's a great question, and I think it's important to acknowledge that while this agreement is a huge step forward, there will be challenges along the way.
Yeah, I mean, what are some of those potential challenges?
Well, for one thing, long-term success is going to require ongoing commitment and collaboration from all the parties involved.
Right. It's easy to get excited at the beginning, but it's the long haul that really matters.
Absolutely. And another potential challenge is making sure that the agreement has the resources and funding to actually implement all of its goals.
Right, because having a plan is one thing, but putting it into action requires money and people power.
Precisely. And then there's the whole issue of navigating the complexities of overlapping jurisdictions. You've got First Nations governments, you've got provincial and federal governments.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of potential for things to get messy.
It definitely could, but I think the key is going to be maintaining open communication and a willingness to adapt as new challenges arise.
So flexibility is going to be key.
Absolutely. But despite all of those potential challenges, I really do think this agreement has incredible promise.
It does, and it makes me wonder if this kind of collaborative model could be applied to other issues as well, not just water management.
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. I mean, why couldn't this approach be used to address things like climate change or poverty or social injustice?
It's like a blueprint for working together to solve complex problems.
Exactly. And I think that's the most important takeaway from this whole story.
That even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, we can find solutions if we're willing to collaborate and respect each other's perspectives.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's really what gives me hope, you know, seeing these kinds of initiatives happening around the world. It's a reminder that change is possible.
Yeah, it's inspiring to see people coming together to create a better future.
And this agreement in British Columbia is a perfect example of that. It shows what can be achieved when people are willing to put aside their differences and work towards a common goal.
So for our listeners out there who are feeling inspired and want to make a difference, what would you say to them?
Well, I think the first step is to educate yourself. You know, learn about the challenges facing your own community.
Yeah, right.
And understand how things like Indigenous rights and environmental issues are all interconnected.
Makes sense.
And then once you have that understanding, you can start to look for ways to get involved.
So like supporting organizations that are working on these issues.
Exactly. Or even just having conversations with your friends and family about these topics. Spreading awareness is so important.
And it all starts with that awareness, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing that we're all connected and that our actions have an impact on the world around us.
Absolutely. We need to start thinking beyond ourselves and considering the well-being of future generations.
The 7 generations principle in action.
Exactly. And I think that's a really powerful way to frame our thinking about these issues.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored a truly groundbreaking agreement for water protection in British Columbia.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating deep dive.
And we've seen how this agreement is not just about protecting the environment, it's also about reconciliation and creating a more just and equitable society.
And it's a story that has implications for all of us, no matter where we live.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in learning more about this agreement and other inspiring initiatives happening around the world, be sure to check out the links in the description below.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Timely Trends and News for more deep dives into fascinating and important topics.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep making a difference.